I want to end this month with something that is not an argument. We have spent the last 8 episodes examining systems, structures, patterns, the mechanisms through which Indian women are trained into smallness, into silence, into a relationship with love that has exhaustion and self-erasure built into its foundations. We have looked at joint families and sibling relationships and marriages and mothers and the women who police each other. We have named things that were unnamed. We have turned things in the light until their shape became visible. That work is important. I believe it is necessary, and it is not finished. I will continue in the months ahead. But today, I want to do something different. I want to set the analysis down briefly and speak about something that does not yield easily to analysis, something that lives in the body more than the mind, something that many of the women I have been speaking to across these episodes have almost no experience of receiving. Gentleness. Not gentleness as a personality trait, not gentleness as a style of communication, gentleness as a form of love. The specific bodily experience of being held carefully by another person, of being in a relationship, any relationship, not only romantic, where you do not have to praise, where you are not waiting for the cost, where what is being offered to you is offered freely, without conditions, without the expectation of a return that will exhaust you. I want to talk today about what happens to a woman who was never taught that this was for her, and what becomes possible when she begins slowly and imperfectly to let it in. The cultural story about Indian women and strength has a particular shape that we have examined from several angles across the series. Strength in its story is defined largely by endurance, by the capacity to absorb difficulty without complaint, to continue functioning under conditions that would in any honest assessment be considered excessive, to give without keeping score, to carry without being carried. And within this story, softness, the desire to be held, to be cared for, to receive rather than perpetually give, is treated with a kind of quiet suspicion, not always openly, but in the texture of how it is discussed. Softness is weakness, neediness, and inability to cope. A woman who requires gentleness is a woman who has not yet developed the strength that the culture requires of her. The aspirational model is the woman who doesn't need much, who is self-sufficient in every emotional sense, who has so thoroughly internalized the caretaking function that she has become capable of being her own caretaker, which means she never has to ask anyone else to do it. And many women, by the time they reach their 30s, have become extraordinarily good at this, at not needing, at not asking, at managing the inner life so efficiently that its requirements become invisible even to themselves. But here is what I have observed in the quiet underneath the efficiency. The not needing is not the absence of need, it is the burial of it. And things that are buried do not disappear. They become over time a particular kind of heaviness, a tiredness that sleep does not fix, a hunger that no amount of managing and achieving and being competent can address, because what is buried is the body's simple, persistent, entirely legitimate need to be held, to be cared for, to receive, to not always be the one who gives. Something very specific happens to a woman who grows up in an environment where harshness is normal. Not necessarily dramatic harshness, not violence or cruelty in any obvious form. The harshness of ordinary life in many households, the sharpness that lives in how things are said, the absence of physical warmth, the default expectation that she will manage without being asked how she is managing, the emotional atmosphere that is functional but not tender. In this environment, the nervous system makes an adaptation. It stops anticipating warmth. It recalibrates to a baseline where the absence of pain is registered as the presence of safety, and the presence of safety is registered as the closest available thing to love. She stops flinching not because she is strong, but because she has learnt that flinching changes nothing. So, she reorganizes. She builds internal architecture. This does not require external gentleness to function. She becomes, in the truest sense of the word, self-contained. And this adaptation works. For a long time it works very well. She is competent, capable, reliable. She does not fall apart when things are hard because she has been internally reorganized around the assumptions that things will be hard. She manages, she endures, she is by every visible measure strong. And then something happens. Someone is kind to her. Actually kind. Not kind because they want something, not kind as a performance or a strategy, just kind. Gentle with her, careful with her, present with her in the way a person is present when they are genuinely, without agenda, interested in her well-being. And something very strange occurs. She does not know what to do with it. The inability to receive gentleness is not a personality flaw, it is a completely coherent response to a specific kind of history. When you have been trained through experience, not instruction, that love comes with conditions, that warmth has a cost, that care is transactional, that receiving without giving is not safe, your nervous system builds a filtration system. It screens incoming care for the cost that must be attached. It looks for the condition. It waits for the other shoe. And when genuine gentleness arrives, the kind with no cost attached, no condition embedded, no other shoe, the filtration system does not know how to process it. It keeps running the scan, keeps looking for what is being asked in return. And in the absence of a detectable cost, it generates one form of its own anxiety, decides that the safety is temporary, that the gentleness is a setup, that trusting it would be naive. This is why genuinely kind people can feel destabilizing to women who have a long history with conditional love. Not because the kindness is wrong, it isn't, but because the nervous system has no template for it. It has been optimized for a different kind of relationship, and what is unfamiliar registers before anything else as unsafe. In India, this pattern has a particular texture, because the harshness that produces it is so often not named as harshness, it is named as realism, as toughness, as preparation for a difficult world. The mother who never said I love you but worked herself to the bone, that is devotion. The father who was critical and demanding, that was high standards. The household that was functional but not tender, that was a good family. So she grows up without a template for warmth that is unconditional, without the embodied knowledge that gentleness is available to her, specifically without a price. And when she enters adult relationships, she gravitates, often without knowing it, towards the familiar, towards love that has the same texture as what she grew up inside, love that is real but not gentle, reliable but not tender, present but not soft, because familiar to the nervous system is safe, even when familiar is not good for her. The woman who was never taught she deserved gentleness tends to find herself in her adult relationship in one of the two positions. The first is when the partner whose emotional register matches her history, who provides in the material of logistical sense but does not offer tenderness, who is reliable but not warm, and in this relationship she is, in a perverse way, comfortable because the absence of tenderness is familiar, and familiar feels like home, and the absence of that destabilizing experience of being genuinely cared for means she never has to navigate the anxiety that care produces in her. She may not be happy in this relationship, but she is not confused by it. She knows how to function inside it, and knowing how to function is, after a lifetime of self-management, a form of safety she is reluctant to give up. The second position is more complicated. She finds herself with someone who is genuinely warm, who offers gentleness without conditions, who asks how she is and means it, who notices when she is struggling and moves towards her rather than away, and she cannot stay in it comfortably. She tests it, withdraws, and watches whether the warmth persists, creates friction to see whether the care is conditional. find reasons to distrust the softness, or alternatively, and this is the more painful version, she becomes so overwhelmed by the experience of being cared for that she overgives in response, flooding the relationship with reciprocity until the balance tips back into the familiar territory of her giving more than she receives. Both responses are the filtration system doing its job. Protecting her from a vulnerability she was never taught it was safe to have, from the specific openness of receiving, of being held, of being seen in her difficulty, of being tended to, that feels in the body like exposure, like the removal of the armor she has been wearing for so long it has become skin. The first thing that changes is the recognition that the armor is not her. It is protective equipment she built in a specific context for specific reasons. It served her. It may still serve her in some context, but it is not her character. It is not her destiny. It is not evidence that she is incapable of receiving love. It is evidence that she was not given a safe environment in which to practice it, and what was never practiced can be learnt slowly in safe conditions with great patience, but learned. The second thing that changes is the ability to distinguish between the familiar and the good, because these are not the same thing, and the nervous system left to its own devices will consistently conflate them. Familiar feels like home, but home is not always where you should live. Learning to tolerate the discomfort of genuine warmth, to stay with it rather than fleeing into the familiar territory of distance or overgiving, is some of the most subtle and important work a woman in this pattern can do. Not because she needs to become soft, not because the armor was wrong, but because a life in which you cannot receive is only half a life. The giving half and the receiving half being held, being cared for, being tended to in your difficulty is not luxury. It is what makes the giving sustainable. The third thing that changes, and this is the one that I find most quietly profound, is the quality of relationships she enters. When a woman who has been running the conditional love template begins to recognize it, begins to see the familiar is not same as good, that comfortable is not same as nourishing, that a relationship that does not destabilize her might simply be one that does not reach her, she begins to choose differently. Not perfectly, not immediately, but with a new question available to her that was not available before. Not is this familiar, not can I function in this, but does this love reach me? Does this reach the parts of me that has been quiet the longest? Does it ask about those parts and receive what it finds there and remain? That question changes everything it touches. We have spent this month across 9 episodes, 9 conversations, 9 different angles on the same essential territory, asking what it costs to be a woman inside Indian family and relationship structures. The cost has many names: silence, smallness, the learned capacity to want less, need less, take up less, the specific loneliness of being surrounded and unseen, the exhaustion of a strength that was never chosen, the gap between brother and sister, the woman who polices because she was policed, the marriage that is adequate and somehow insufficient, the self that learnt to disappear. All of these costs are real, all of them are worth naming. All of them are worth examining with the kind of clear, unsentimental attention we have tried to bring this month. But I want to end here in this final episode of March with something that is not about cost. Gentleness is not a reward for surviving. I want to say that one more time because I think it is the thing most worth taking from this episode. Gentleness is not something you earn by enduring enough. It is not the price at the end of suffering. It is not reserved for women who have suffered sufficiently to deserve softness. It was always what you deserved from the very beginning, before the first correction, before the training, before the armor was built and the needs were buried and the hunger was managed into invisibility. There is a version of love available to you, not in the abstract, in your actual life, in the relationships you are in, and the ones you have not yet entered. That does not ask you to brace, that holds carefully, that asks genuinely, that remains when it finds the part of you that have been quiet the longest. You do not have to earn it. You do not have to suffer into it. You do not have to become smaller or larger or different than you are to deserve it. You deserve it now, exactly as you are, with all the armor still on. If it needs to stay on for now with all the hunger still buried, if it is not yet safe to surface it, you are allowed to be held gently. You were always allowed. Everything we have examined this month, the patterns, the systems, the costs, the losses, and this final and most essential question of what love looks like when it actually reaches you. That is the territory of the love you deserve. It is not a book about finding the right person. It is a book about understanding what you have been taught to accept, what you actually need, and the difference, which is something vast between the two. If this month gave you something to sit with, if any of these nice conversations named something that has been living in you without a name, that book is where I continue the exploration, quietly, honestly, without prescriptions. The details are in the show notes. Thank you for being here for all of March. We continue next month.